So you finally decided to brew your own beer from a recipe kit that you found online or in a book. But as you're reading it, it seems like some sort of secret code. What does it all mean? Well, that's the question that we're going to answer in this video, so stick around. So most recipes are going to be split into two parts, whether they're all grain or extract recipes. The first part gives you some technical details of how actually to brew the beer. The second part is all to do with the ingredients. Okay, so if we talk about some of the technical details you'll expect to see in a recipe. First of all, you're going to be given the batch size. This just tells you the actual beer yield you'll have at the end of the process. Often with all grain recipes, you're going to be given the mash temperature. And this is important because we want to have the most efficient mashing that we can to release all those lovely fermentable sugars that we're going to need later in fermentation. Another key piece of information is the boiling time. So this is actually one of the most important parts of the process, I would say, apart from fermentation. In addition to this, you'll also be told the schedule that you have to add any hops. Sometimes you may just have to add this at the beginning of the boil, but often you'll have to add it at key stages in order to get the most out of those hops. Other important information given is to do with fermentation. Now, depending on the recipe that you follow, you may or may not have primary and secondary fermentation, but this is a measurement normally given in days. Some crucial details given are estimated original gravity and final gravity, and this is key information for any brewer so they can get the best out of that brew day. In addition to that, you will be given some indication of the IBU and the SRM, and this just tells you firstly the bitterness you can expect from the beer and also the colour. All these technical details to do with the process is what's going to help you brew the beer more accurately and to a better standard. So this is why it's important to understand where you can find this information in a beer recipe. When it comes to the ingredients that we're actually brewing with, we split that part of the recipe into two main sections. The first being the grain bill and the second being the hops bill. When we're talking about the grain bill, this really does apply to all grain recipes, as extract recipes will rely on either dry malt extract or liquid malt extract. So here we're talking about all grain. So the grain bill really is just a list of the grains used in that particular recipe, and it's given in weight. So it's either going to be pounds or grams. It might also tell you about the type of variety of the grain, and it's actually the look of it, whether it's a 2-row or a 6-row kernel. So that's just how, if you actually look at the grain, it's whether or not the kernels are in 2 rows or in 6 rows. So the 2-row and 6-row configuration, it's not something to worry about too much, but it just determines the saturation of the liquid getting into the grain during the mashing. But you don't need to worry about that too much at the beginner stage. Another piece of information you're often given in recipes is the Lovibond scale, and this is the capital L that you can see in most recipes. Now, this doesn't refer to litres as I thought when I first looked at these recipes years ago. In fact, it's very similar to the SRM. It's all to do with colour, whereas the Lovibond is to do with the colour of the actual grain. The SRM is to do with the colour of the finished beer. They're pretty close in the scales that they have, so there's not much don't really need to worry about it too much until you get a little bit more into the hobby here. Final thing you'll see in the grain bill is a percentage, and this purely just refers to the quantity of the grain in the total out of 100. So turning to the hops bill now, and this is basically a list of the hops that we're going to use in the brewing process. And this also includes those recipes that use dry hopping. Now, this is not always the case, but it will be clearly marked. The hops are also given as a weight, often in ounces and grams, and you also see a percentage. Now this doesn't refer to the actual quantity overall. In fact, it refers to the percentage of alpha acids. And alpha acids add to the bitterness, so this is connected to IBU. A final piece of information given is the yeast. Now often beer recipes will give the main yeast that's recommended, but also some recommendations. So if you can't get that sort of yeast from your local brew shop, you can go online and find an alternative that will act in near enough the same way as the recommended yeast. So the last thing to consider is how much beer you actually want to brew. Most of the recipes online or in books will have a brew yield of about 5 gallons or 23 litres. Now you may want more, say if you're having a big party in a couple of months, or you might want less. Perhaps you can't quite manage to finish that amount of beer before you get bored of it. So what you have to do is to change the proportions. You can easily do this online. There's lots of calculators and conversion sort of tools that you can use, also a number of apps. If you're feeling particularly bored, you might want to do it yourself. So what you're going to do is calculate the volume and change it either up or down. Okay? If you're interested in this, why don't you head over to the website where I wrote a full article on this topic. Just go over to beercreation.com/recipe101. I hope that you found this video really useful and that now you're going to go online and find yourself some recipes and brew some really good beer. If you did find it useful, why not share it with a friend? Also, if you have any more questions, just leave me a comment and I will get back to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that I can send you notifications about any video that I put on next. So thanks very much for watching and I'll see you again soon.